Amid escalating tensions over the Ukraine conflict, top officials from Washington and Moscow held fresh talks today. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke to his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov. And in the latest, Blinken has urged Russia to pursue diplomatic paths, quote-unquote, during the call. These are the details that are emerging at this point. He asked Russia to immediately de-escalate tensions and to withdraw its troops from Ukraine's borders. Blinken further emphasized that further invasion of Ukraine would be met with swift and severe consequences. Lavrov, on the other hand, said that U.S. remains ready to discuss Russia's security concerns, talks between the two sides coming in after a heated face-off at the UNSC. On Monday, Moscow had sent a letter to Washington on its views about America's response to Russia's security demands. So far, no information on the contents of Moscow's response has been given out. The call is the first time that Lavrov and Blinken have spoken directly since the US and NATO handed over their response to Russia's demands. Both rejected Moscow's demands for a guarantee that Ukraine will be not joining the NATO. US President Joe Biden earlier said that the US is ready for any scenario given the ongoing buildup of the Russian troops at the border. He also said that Russia will face severe and swift consequences if it invades Ukraine.
I had a productive talk last week with President Zelensky, and we continue to engage in nonstop diplomacy and to de-escalate tensions and attempt like the devil to improve security for our allies and partners and for all of Europe, for that matter. And today, in the United Nations, we've laid out the full nature of Russia's threat to Ukraine's sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Ukraine, as well as the core tenets of a rule-based international order. And we continue to urge diplomacy as the best way forward. But with Russia's continuing its buildup of its forces around Ukraine, we are ready no matter what happens.
The West claims that Russia continues to add to the 100,000 troops and a wide range of war-making equipment already in place on Ukraine's borders, including inside Moscow ally Belarus. U.S. officials say Moscow is set to invade Ukraine. Meanwhile, taking diplomatic efforts to solve the crisis, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson visited Kiev today, holding talks with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Earlier, both Washington and London stepped up efforts to build pressure on Moscow. The United States and Britain are preparing new devastating sanctions against people linked to the Kremlin. American senators saying that they are almost done with finalizing the deal, which will probably be put forward in the coming days. Britain says the sanctions against Russia will be the toughest ever. Responding to the threat of the penalties, the Russian embassy in Washington has said that Moscow will not back down in the face of U.S. sanctions threats. And with us on the broadcast is our correspondent Susan Tehrani from New York. Take us through the key takeaways of those talks, Susan. A lot still remains to be revealed in terms of what all was discussed.
Yeah, absolutely. However, there is a very interesting development, at least from the Russian side. Sergei Lavrov now indicating that Russians are not backing down from their security concerns on the one hand, and on the other hand, claiming that in these talks, in this phone conversation with Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, the Americans said that they would perhaps have further dialogues regarding Russia's security concerns, and that's something that they would talk about. The readout from the State Department was a little more generic. Ned Price said that the two sides talked about de-escalating the situation in Ukraine, and the United States kept on its position that it respects Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and called on Russia to pull back its troops. Blinken urged Russia to, quote, pursue the diplomatic path in the Lavrov call, and also the immediate Russian de-escalation as well. Lavrov, for his part, says that the U.S. is ready to discuss Russia's security concerns, and that is perhaps the biggest takeaway of this call, if that is indeed true. That's something that we haven't gotten confirmation from the U.S. side. But as you mentioned, yes, there are still a lot of moving parts. And remember, we still don't know whether or not Russia has responded in earnest to that letter that it denies that it has regarding its security concerns back to the U.S. side.
Right, so as of now, there is also no clarity on what exactly Russia has said in its response.
Right, exactly. We don't even know if a letter has been submitted, what Russia has said in its response, and whether or not it really wants to. In what way does it want to move forward with these quote-unquote dialogues? We do have a sense that perhaps there may be some sort of compromise when it comes to issues regarding arms control and the number of troops that would be stationed on the part of NATO and the West in Eastern Europe and those countries that are close to Russia. But again, those are all speculations, and nothing is clear-cut. Something that to perhaps look into and to look forward to would be that press conference between the leaders of Hungary and Vladimir Putin himself. There's a press conference coming up, and I think that will be very telling. And also, let's not forget that Boris Johnson of UK will be hearing about his visit to Ukraine as well. And I think that'll also be telling to see, how much support he will be sort of giving from the European side to Ukraine, and how much backing America will have on the part of Europe as well.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.